So these are going to be a compilation of cryptids. Enjoy. And don't mind some of the videos. Some of them I was just starting out and trying out new mics, and they're not all the best. But I do appreciate you watching.
Hi, welcome to Nightly Haven. I'm your host Nikki, and today I was feeling a little spooky, so I thought we would cover mimics. Mimics refer to a creature that can shapeshift or often take on appearances of your loved ones. They can also mimic voices, whether it's strangers or someone you know, and they like to deceive. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought we would just talk about that. So on Reddit, I got Itty Bitty 216. Around 15 years ago, when both of my kids were toddlers, I was putting them to bed one night, and my son was adamant that he wear his favorite red race car pajamas. I happily obliged, helped him change into them, and tucked him into bed. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with a friend who had come over to chat and catch up. The way that my apartment was set up, you could see my kid's bedroom doorway from the kitchen table. My friends and I were talking for a while before we suddenly interrupted by the sound of my son screaming. We both turned and looked at the bedroom doorway and saw my son standing there loudly, crying, shrieking, and wearing his green pajamas with airplanes on them. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was so wrong. The hairs on my back stood on end, and a cold shiver shot down my spine. My friend and I wordlessly stared at each other, not knowing what to do, and for a second, and we both knew that my son couldn't have changed his pajamas by himself yet. We looked back at the doorway, and my son was gone. We ran into the bedroom and found him, tucked in bed, still sleeping peacefully in his red race car pajamas. My friend asked me if I saw him standing there in his green airplane pajamas, and I confirmed that I had. My friend was freaking out and left. I slept on my kid's bedroom floor that night to make sure nothing happened to them. My friend still talked to him about it to this day. It's one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me. And my son, of course, doesn't remember any of it, but he loves hearing the story of how his doppelganger scared the crap out of us. I don't know what I would do if I looked out and I seen one of my kids standing there, and I know that it's not them. That has to feel so, like, you have to feel that, right? Like, there has to be, like, something unnatural that makes your internal, go up and just be like, that's not my kid. I don't know how I would handle that situation. I probably would have ran out of the house. I mean, I would grab my kid first, but I probably would have ran out of the house. Well, that's our story for today. Just remember, there are 3 things you should not do if you encounter a mimic. 1, never acknowledge a mimic. 2, never follow a mimic. No matter if you hear a weird sound or something beckoning, calling you, do not follow a mimic. And 3, always remain calm because they feed off your fear. Have a creepy night, guys. Hi, welcome to Nightly Haven. My name is Nikki, and today we're going to be talking about Bigfoot, which I've always been really intrigued with. I've had tons of friends and family convinced that they have seen or heard Bigfoot. I think it could be a real thing. I mean, if it's like, an ancient primate, I don't know. There's supernatural aspects to it. People have different ideas on, what it is. Is it real? But there's been so many encounters that people have had through the years, like hundreds of them, that it really makes you wonder, So I was scrolling on Reddit, and from Necropanther states, I live in Sierra Nevada, foothills of California. 7 acres of land, mostly densely forested and wild. There is a very large pond about a half-mile behind my house on a neighboring property. My closest neighbor was this old lady who left home because her husband passed away and she couldn't take care of herself. Well, that's really sad. So for many years, it just sat abandoned. 3 years ago, I was outside just before sunset doing some work in my side yard, and I looked over at my neighbor's house. This house was about 100 to 130 yards away from my house. I saw this large creature walking upright, all black, top to bottom, while walking upright, heading downhill towards the pond. What weirded me out at first was that its arms were too long. My brain kept trying to assume that it was a person carrying something. It moved quick, and the temperature was hot outside. So it would be bonkers to be wearing all black suit on an empty property with no vehicles around and walking straight into a dense woods. I called my neighbor, who was staying with her children in another city, and immediately asked her if a large person was supposed to be on her property. She said no. Right after that, I started looking into this whole Bigfoot thing, and I became a believer. Also, black bears live in this area and occasionally hit up my trash can, but this creature definitely did not walk like a black bear. And there's tons of stories like that. I mean, you can go all day long and there's countless stories of Bigfoot. I'm from Ohio originally, and like Salt Fork has tons of encounters on Bigfoot. They actually have, I believe they have a Bigfoot club, or people that go out there and investigate, and there's been sightings. Same in Florida. I forget what they call it, like Swamp Man. And a lot of these stories, they're always talking about how it smells so bad. I mean, so many stories all over the world that have similar sightings and similar things happen. It makes you want to be like, how can it not be real, So, if you encounter on Google, it tells you if you encounter what you believe to be a Bigfoot, remain calm, slowly back away, and avoid direct eye contact. If the creature approaches, try to make yourself appear large and non-threatening, and if it becomes aggressive, throw rocks and other non-lethal objects to deter it. So, if you encounter a Bigfoot, stay calm, back away. Don't make a sound. I'm running for sure. I'm not gonna remember any of that in the moment. But if you encounter a Bigfoot, stay calm. Back up slowly. And never, ever make a sound. Well, spooky friends, have a wonderful, wonderful spooky night. And until next time, bye, dears. And when a rocket goes out of the atmosphere into space, it goes out and it looks like a little tiny star. And then it drifts off and just disappears. And you can't see it anymore. And that's exactly what the object that me and my friends seen 8 months prior did. And I'm pretty sure that was not a rocket. So those are some of the experiences that I've had, other people have had through the years, that makes me curious, intrigues me, makes me want to know more. We don't know everything. There also could be something. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts. Thank you for joining us, and have a very, very spooky night. Bye. I could be wrong. There could be nothing.
My God, that's a UFO. Advanced drone swarm technology could account for some of the thousands of new UFO sightings in 2019. But can it explain them all?
Welcome to Nightly Haven, where mystery meets curiosity. If that's something that you're into, hit like and share. My name is Nikki, and today we're going to be talking about UFOs. I think it's something that is really, really cool, especially all the drones and sightings. It's something that's been going on for a really, really long time. It's not just something of modern times. When I was in art history class, we actually did a whole series on UFOs and Renaissance paintings. And one of the Renaissance paintings is Madonna and Child, an author. In the back of the picture, there's a disc in the sky, and it looks like a UFO. And in the background, by a lake, I believe, there is a shepherd looking and pointing at the UFO, and there's a dog next to him that's also looking at the disc shape. So, I mean, this is something that's been going around for centuries before there was even planes in the sky. People were seeing things. There's countless sightings all over the world, even like hieroglyphics and Native American lore. So I just thought it would be something that we could talk about today. One of the first stories I wanted to go over, which I thought was really, really cool. And also, if you stay to the end, you'll get to hear one of my personal stories and my parents' personal stories. Also, shout out to Dougie Corrado. Follow him if you like him. Story boy. Good merch. Okay. I have to put on my glasses because I'm blind. So Travis Walton, I don't know if you've ever seen Fire in the Sky, but it's a movie that was done in the 80s or 90s, I believe, and it's supposed to be based on his true story of being abducted. Some people think it's a hoax. Some people believe him. I kind of tend towards believing him. I mean, you're never 100% sure, but they did all do polygraph tests and passed. One of them was inconclusive. His story hasn't really changed throughout the years, and he just kind of genuinely seems like a honest guy, and he was really confused and shook up at the time, but not everyone's gonna believe you. I looked at the vague but reassuring forms of the doctors around me. Abruptly, my vision cleared. The sudden horror of what I saw rocked me as I realized I was definitely not in a hospital. I was looking square in the face of a horrible creature with huge, luminous brown eyes the size of quarters. I looked frantically around me. There were 3 of them. Hysteria overcame me instantly. Travis Walton's experience is unequivocally the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. And that was a quote from travis-walton.com. The Walton story begins on an average workday of the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. The men, Alan, Dallas, Dwayne, Smith, Mike, Rogers, Steve, Pierce, Kenny, Peterson, John Collette, and Travis Walton finished their long workday and jumped in the truck driven by Rogers, a good friend of Walton. As they progressed down the road and over a rise, they noticed a bright, glowing light, and as they made their way through the long wooded highway, only to suddenly encounter an enormous, hovering UFO. They stopped in disbelief as 22-year-old Travis Walton jumped out of the truck to investigate. Not me. His crewmates were horrified when they witnessed a bolt of blue light flash from the alien ship that knocked Travis down. They fled in fear, only to return to try to save him, but unfortunately, Travis was gone. Fearing Travis' death, the crewmates called the police when they returned. However, when a search of the area indicated no sign of Travis, puzzling questions arose. Did aliens truly abduct him? Or was this an elaborate hoax concocted by his co-workers who might have accidentally killed or murdered Travis? The 6 crewmen passed polygraph examinations, but the town was awash in rumors. Then the Walton story became an international media circus and caused even more problems for the men who witnessed the abduction. Now the U.S. government has confirmed the existence of UFOs in worldwide interest, and more reports from credible sources indicate that it would be foolish to think that humanity and life on Earth is a solo event in a universe with trillions of solar systems and planets. Travis Walton and the men have all stuck by their account of what happened. They haven't changed their story. And I got that from monstersandcritics.com. You could do your own research, make your own decisions. I just find that really interesting. A lot of people's lives changed, and a lot of people don't even tell their stories because they don't want to be marked as crazy. So on Reddit, Appalachia Wind writes, "First time I ever tried to write this down. First time telling anyone outside the family. I'm leaving out time and location and some other details because I'm still scared of what might happen with it publicly, I guess. Summer before 8th grade, me and two of my friends snuck out at midnight to go walk around the neighborhood and go to see these girls on the next block who were having a sleepover. We turn a corner in our neighborhood and there's a huge black blimp-shaped thing in the sky, like the picture of the Hindenburg, but bigger than that, and as close, if not closer, completely silent and the size of at least 4 to 5 football fields across. No exaggeration. Even though I was young, we stare at it entranced, asking each other over and over and over again if we see it, which we all agree that we do. Standing there, frozen in one place, it's like black polished gunmetal. No lights, no sound, no anything. It's just hovering there. And then I didn't know what happened, but time clearly jumps. And next thing I remember is the craft/ship/government experiment, whatever the hell it is, and it's gone. And there's a tiny glowing white barbell thing in the sky, seemingly slowly falling to the earth with wisps of smoke coming off it. Then 2 brand new black trucks with silver gearboxes on the back, like F-150s or S-10s, but nicer, came speeding down the street, going about 70 in a residential 25-mile-per-hour neighborhood. Then after that, I remember walking home to one of my friends' houses and going to bed. At that point, it was like 5 or 6 a.m. and the sun was coming up. We all made a promise to tell my dad in the morning because he worked in the city, but we never did. I don't know what happened later in life to my friends who was there, but the other one was my best friend and we sort of made an unspoken pact never to talk about it, and don't know how or why we did that. We did reconnect over Facebook and such over the years, but it was like there was something between us that neither of us wanted to touch or talk about. Looking back on it now, there's no way we could have been the only ones to see it. It wasn't that late at night, and it was over a heavy populated suburb of a major city. The idea of this has always scared me more than any possible abduction scenario. That there were others, and we're all voluntarily suffering a sort of collective amnesia, except in how we're not. I thought about hypnosis, but that scares me too. Plus, I'm not sure if I trust the results. I was just a kid then, and I'm not sure if I could trust the hypnotist. What I do know is that there's no way it was just the 3 of us who saw it. We're talking a huge thing hovering in the sky, directly above hundreds of houses, just after midnight on a summer weekend night. The news, nothing in the paper, nothing on TV, no word spoken about it ever again by anyone. This is a true story. I'm a little older than the average around here, I think, but I know what creepypasta and stuff like that is. This happened. There's no way I'm not the only one who remembers it. No way. Thank you for letting me get this off my chest. Whew. Okay, known on Reddit. I can't say for sure what happened to me that night, but here's what I know. I was driving home for the weekend from the school of Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I am on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I notice what appeared to be a flashing light behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over. So I turned to the next country road, about a quarter of a mile where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop, I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance. The lights suddenly disappeared and no car drove past. Now here's where the story takes a turn for the weird. And I'm sure you guys will think I'm just making all this up because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie or story. The electronics in my car started going haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations while the volume kept going up and down, while the dome light and headlights started to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56 p.m. I started to think to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electric system of my car. So I leaned down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and that is the last thing I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and I see nothing but the night sky full of bright stars. It was cold that night, and it seemed like I had never seen stars that bright in my life. I sat up and looked around, and I saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field, surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why am I here? Am I asleep in the middle of a field? Where's the F is my car? I got up and started to walk towards the road. In the distance, I could see headlights. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350 north and 50 west. I was half a mile away from my car, which was just right off up the main road. I started to walk towards the headlight I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk, but about a half a mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked at my phone, which was setting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed, and since I turned off onto the side of the road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car completely dumbfounded, wondering what the hell had just happened to me. After about half an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that the battery was dead, so I got a phone and called AAA to come out and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me, since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what had just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over a half a mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I have only shared this story with one other person, my uncle. I'm sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy or they would call BS on the whole story, and I can't blame them. If someone came to me with a story like that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. That was a good one. That's a really, really good one. That's really creepy. Well, that was a really cool story. Just another perfect example of someone who doesn't want other people to know about their experience because they don't want other people to think that they're crazy. I've been intrigued with UFOs since I was a little girl from my own experiences. I've always kind of been a sleepwalker, but I've never woken up while I was sleepwalking, except for when I was almost 6 years old. I woke up around 3 a.m. I had my hand, I woke up with my hand on the door. Either I just came back in or I was ready to go outside. And that was definitely startling to wake up that way, in the pitch black in your living room when you last thing remember you're going to sleep in your own bed. And I just remember I turned around, and from my living room there was a hallway to the back kitchen door, which led to the backyard. And I seen these lights, and they were in a circular motion. And at the time, the only way that I could describe it was that it looked like Christmas lights, which is weird because I never heard anyone describe like a UFO or anything like that way. And it scared me so much that I peed myself and was screaming, hysterical 6-year-old, soaking wet. I stripped off my clothes. My dad comes running downstairs to a hysterical naked 6-year-old, what is happening? And my dad just told me to go upstairs and get cleaned up and get dressed, and I don't remember anything after that. I just went to bed, I guess. But that's always haunted me since I was little. And since then, I've always been intrigued with the unknown and, you know, aliens, UFOs. And then when I was older, which is actually this kind of correlates with my dad's story. But when I was older, I was watching a UFO show. It was similar to Sightings. I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been on the History Channel. And they showed a picture of this guy describing this UFO. And they put a picture on it. And now, granted, this is like over 20-something years later, if not longer. It was exactly what I seen. It wasn't the same colors. Because I remember mines were like oranges and like yellows and reds or whatever. This one was like more like purples and stuff. But it was exactly what I seen when I was 6 years old. And it just gave me such confirmation because I had never heard anyone describe like a UFO sighting or a UFO like that before. So I thought in my 6-year-old mind, it was just my imagination. That wasn't really a UFO. Like, you know what I mean? And I even tried to rationalize it and say maybe because we were in the city, which usually this stuff happens in the country, but you know, maybe it was just a car driving by. I know that sounds silly because the car doesn't look like Christmas lights, but I was just trying anything to rationalize what I seen was not what I thought it was. But the thing is my backyard, it was in the city. I didn't have a big backyard. And when you walked out, it was like all grass. And then there was this like cement, like edging, almost like a square. And the road was like 4 feet below my yard. So the only lights, if you did see any car lights, it was like from like clear across the city. So that didn't even correlate. But you know, I try to rationalize it. When I seen this picture years later, it just was confirmation that like I wasn't crazy. Like that's exactly what I've been saying for years, but I didn't want it to be true, or I tried to rationalize it as a child's mind. When my dad was really little, he was probably like between 6 and 9, and he did live in the country. And this is actually the reason, still to this day, I do not sleep on my stomach. But he had bunk beds, and it was a hot night, so I had the blankets off. And he was sleeping on his stomach. And he said he felt these hands like grab him by the ribs and try to lift him up. And he said the only way he could describe the feeling of these hands, because he was like paralyzed, he couldn't yell. Like he tried to like yell for his mom and like nothing would come out. He couldn't move. And he said the only way he could describe these hands was that it was almost like there was skin over bone. Like there was no like meat or muscle or anything like that. It was just skin over bone. And it started to lift him up. And finally he was able to scream and call for my grandma. And my grandma comes in, and of course she's all like, oh, you know, it was just a dream. It's just your imagination, you know. And that also stuck with my dad from a very early age and made him intrigued and curious about if there was other life forms out there other than us. And kind of like my story, which my story happened after my dad's, kind of similar thing. Something happened to him when he was little. And when he was older, he was probably around the same age as I was. I remember we were all sitting in the living room, him and his wife at the time, and me, and I was sitting on the floor, and we were watching Sightings, which was one of our favorite shows. And this guy was talking about aliens, and he had drawn these alien hands, and they were like very kind of almost very skinny skeleton like. And I just happened to look over at my dad, and he's like white as a sheet, like so white. And I'm like, what? I'm like, Dad, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? Like, are you having a heart attack? And he just looks at me, and he's like, Nikki, that is exactly the hands that I felt tried to lift me up. He said, if I could have seen those hands, that's what they would have looked like. And then there was his confirmation to know, you know, that he wasn't going crazy. It wasn't his imagination. He did see or feel something. When my mom was little, she told me this story that her and my grandma were driving. This was in the middle of the country, and it was really late at night. and they were going to go pick up my Uncle Dave. And they were on this back road with like forest on each side of it. And they seen this ball of light, like this disc, and was following them for a really, really long time. Like it was like really down low. And like you could see it out the back window. And it was messing with the electronics on their radio. The radio kept going in and out. And it followed them for a really good minute, my mom said. And eventually, you know, it went away. And then when I was older, like, so my first encounter, I was probably like 6. And then when I was older, when I was about, I want to say between 12, 13, I don't know. I was in 8th grade or going in, I think I was in 7th grade going into 8th grade. And I was sleeping over my friend's house, same friend that we had the Ouija board incident with. And we were sitting on our leg on our stomachs, looking out her window, and we were looking up at the sky, and we were just talking, you know, about what we were going to do the next day, what plans we were going to do. And we seen this, it looked like a star at first in the sky, and it was just hovering there, like not moving, and then it just zoomed clear across the sky. I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands of miles. And then it would just stay there. And then it would across the sky again. I mean, all the way. I mean, I'm talking across the sky. Like a plane cannot move this fast. And we probably watched this for a good hour. Like half hour. I don't even remember how long it was, but it was forever. Because it would stay there for like a long time before it would like shoot off. And then it would just stay there. And then it would shoot off. And then finally it just shot straight up. And then it looked like a little tiny star in the sky. And then it just kind of drifted and disappeared. And me and my friend just looked at each other like, did you see that? Like, that had to be a UFO, right? Like, what was that? And then about, I want to say 8 months later, I actually went to Florida for my aunt to watch my cousins for the summer. And this was the summer of my 8th grade. And I was going to earn my own money to afford to buy my own school clothes. And I was very excited to be able to do that. And while I was down there, it was the first time that I ever seen a rocket go out of the atmosphere into space. And when a rocket goes out of the atmosphere into space, it goes out and it looks like a little tiny star. And then it drifts off and just disappears. And you can't see it anymore. And that's exactly what the object that me and my friends seen 8 months prior did. And I'm pretty sure that was not a rocket. So those are some of the experiences that I've had, other people have had through the years that makes me curious, intrigues me, makes me want to know more. We don't know everything. There also could be something. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts. Thank you for joining us and have a very, very spooky night. Bye. I could be wrong. There could be nothing.
My God, that's a UFO. Advanced drone swarm technology could account for some of the thousands of new UFO sightings in 2019. But can it explain them all?
Hi, welcome to Nightly Haven, where mystery meets curiosity. If that's you, subscribe, like, and share. Today we're going to be talking about the Mothman, which is something that's intrigued me since I was a really little girl. I grew up in Ohio, about an hour and a half away from Point Pleasant, so I grew up hearing about legend, the tragedy that unfolded, and the myth and legend of the Mothman. The Mothman is also known as an omen of tragedy. In the shadow corners of American folklore, few entities inspire as much intrigue and terror as the Mothman. A towering figure with glowing red eyes and a massive bat-like wings. This cryptid has been linked to some of the most devastating tragedies in modern times. First appearing in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the 1960s, the Mothman is often seen as a harbinger of doom, spectral warning before disaster strikes. The birth of a legend started at Point Pleasant, and it was the Dark Visitor, aka the Mothman. Legends of the Mothman began November 12, 1966, when 5 men digging a grave in Clinton, West Virginia, reported seeing a large winged creature soar overhead. Just 3 days later, 2 couples driving near the abandoned TNT area in Point Pleasant had an even more terrifying experience. They described a creature over 6 feet tall with wings that span nearly 10 feet. Its glowing red eyes locked onto them as it pursued their car at incredible speed. More sightings followed, with dozens of eyewitnesses describing an eerily similar figure lurking near the town. One of the most detailed encounters came from Linda Scarberry, who, along with her husband and friends, was chased by the creature in their car. He sure does like cars, don't he? She described it as having a humanoid form, but its eyes were hypnotic and paralyzed. Some witnesses claim that the Mothman emitted an unsettling humming or screeching noise before vanishing into the night. Others reported a strange electrical disturbances, animal disappearances, and even precognitive dreams after encountering the being. Another witness, Neil Partridge, a local resident, reported that his television screen began to distort before he heard a strange metallic sound outside his home. When he went out to investigate, he saw 2 glowing red eyes staring at him from the darkness. His dog, Bandit, ran off towards the creature and was never seen again. Many believe this was another chilling encounter of the Mothman. Over the course of a year, more than 100 people came forward with similar accounts of a large red-eyed winged figure watching them from the darkness. Some even reported physical symptoms such as burning eyes or a lingering sense of dread after their encounters. The hysteria reached its peak December 15, 1967, when the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed during rush hour. 46 people lost their lives. And in the aftermath, some began to draw the chilling conclusion and connection with the Mothman sightings that had been surging for months prior to this tragic catastrophe. Could this being have been an omen, a warning of an impending disaster, or was this something more sinister? Some locals believe the Mothman is a manifestation of an ancient curse. According to legend, a Shawnee chief named Cornstalk cursed the land after being betrayed and murdered by the settlers of 1977. Some theorists claim the Mothman is a supernatural entity connected to this curse, bringing misfortune wherever it appears. While Point Pleasant remains the epicenter for the Mothman legend, reports of similar creatures have surfaced around the world, often linked to catastrophic events. Witnesses in Chernobyl, Ukraine, claim to have seen a massive winged figure hovering near the nuclear plant before the infamous meltdown of 1986. Others say a Mothman-like entity was spotted near the Twin Towers before September 11th attacks. Similar reports have emerged from places like Japan before the 2011 Fukushima disaster. In Chicago, sightings of a winged humanoid have been reported as recently as 2010, with the witnesses describing a creature eerily similar to the original Point Pleasant Mothman. In one case, a security guard near O'Hare International Airport claimed he saw a large red-eyed creature take off into the sky. Other reports have come from local parkgoers and truck drivers, each describing an overwhelming sense of dread before spotting the entity. Skeptics argue that these reports are either hoaxes, misidentification of large birds like the sandhill cranes, or a product of mass hysteria. However, the many who have seen it insist that the Mothman is something beyond human comprehension. Is it a myth, a legend, or is it something more? Over the years, countless theories have emerged about the true nature of the Mothman. Some believe it's an interdimensional being that appears during times of great upheaval. It could be an alien, a government experiment gone wrong, or even an ancient creature awakened from his slumber. Paranormal researchers have drawn comparisons between Mothman and similar folklore creatures such as the Owlman of Cornwall, England, and the Garuda of Hindu mythology. It's the eternal watcher. The Mothman legend continues to captivate and terrify. With each new sighting, it reignites the debate. Is it a protector, a cursed soul, or something beyond human comprehension? We may never know for sure. Wherever tragedy strikes and looms, the Mothman is never far behind, and perhaps warning us of what's yet to come. Well, thank you for staying with me towards the end. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any suggestions of other stories that you would like to hear from, I'm all ears. I'm always welcome to suggestions. And if you have any personal experiences of your own. But if you do like it, please like, share. It really does help. And my spooky friend, have a wonderful night. Bye.
Hi, welcome to Nightly Haven, where mystery meets curiosity. If you find yourself drawn to the strange, the unexplained, and the stories that keep the night just a little bit darker, then you're in the right place. Subscribe, like, and share, and stay close, because tonight's tale just might follow you home. Imagine this. It's just after midnight, you're home alone, when a knock rattles the front door. Not loud, just deliberate. You look outside. 2 kids stand on the porch, heads down, still. They ask to come in, and just before you reach the knob, you see their eyes. Completely black, empty, soulless. Tonight, we step into one of the most unsettling modern legends, the Black-Eyed Children. This eerie legend didn't rise from the shadows of folklore or the ancient text. It emerged from the modern world. The first widely known account dates back to 1996 in Abilene, Texas, when a journalist, Brian Bethel, stopped in a parking lot to write a check. He sat in his car. 2 boys approached, asking for a ride home to get money so they could see a movie. At first, they seemed polite, too polite, but something felt off. Their tone didn't match their words. The air around Bethel seemed to thicken. A slow, creeping dread took hold. Then he saw them clearly. Their eyes, completely black. No whites, no irises, just infinite obsidian voids. He didn't speak. He didn't think. He just threw the car in gear and sped off. I had this overwhelming sense that if I unlocked the door, something terrible would happen, Bethel would later write. Since Bethel's chilling encounter, reports have poured in from all corners of the world. Virginia, Ohio, Louisiana, and even UK and Japan. The stories are uncannily alike. Pale children aged 6 to 16, often appearing in pairs, dressed strangely, sometimes in outdated clothing, and speaking in flat and unnatural tones. They always ask to be let into your home, your car, your life, and they never come in unless they are invited. Some say they're just children, lost, afraid, but the primal, suffocating fear they seem to stir in those who meet them say otherwise. In a Louisiana motel in 2010, a woman traveling alone checked into a roadside motel. It was around 3 a.m. when a knock came at her door. 2 children stood outside, one boy, one girl, heads tilted low. She asked what they needed. Their voices barely rose above a whisper. "We need to use your phone." A chill ran down her spine. She didn't open the door, just stared through the peephole. The kids didn't leave. They just stood there still as statues. And when she finally drew the curtain to look again, they were staring back into her soul with black, lifeless eyes. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just prayed the sun would rise. In a camper in Ohio in 2014, a man camping in his RV parked deep into the Ohio woods heard a soft tapping around 1 a.m. He opened the curtain. 2 pale-faced boys stood there, motionless in the moonlight. They said that they were lost, asked to come inside. But as the man looked closer, dread curled his guts. One of them said, "We can't come in unless you invite us." And that's when he saw their eyes, solid black, as if someone had scooped the humanity out of them. He didn't sleep, gun in hand, lights on, until dawn broke through the trees. In an apartment in Portland in 2018, a woman living on the 3rd floor apartment building was awoken by 3 sharp knocks on the door. No buzzer, no call from the downstairs, just the knocking. She peeked through the peephole. A girl and a boy, maybe 9 or 10, dirty, torn clothes, blank expression. "We're hungry," the girl said softly. "May we come in?" When she hesitated, the girl's expression didn't change, only her tone. "We'll wait until you say yes." A wave of nausea washed over her. Her vision blurred. Something felt wrong. She slammed the door and called the police. By the time they arrived, the hallway was empty. On a roadside in England in 2005, driving through the fog near Cannock Chase, a man spotted a girl standing alone on the side of the road. Concerned, he slowed down. She approached the driver's side window. No fear, no urgency, just calm, cold content. "You need to take me home," she said. But when he asked where she lived, she didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her head, her eyes black and endless. He sped off, heart pounding, convinced he just stared in the face of something inhuman. The black-eyed children invite a storm of theories. Are they ghosts, alien hybrids, demonic entities that need permission to enter our world? Some paranormal investigators believe they're similar to vampires, bound by rules to prevent them from entering uninvited. Others think they are psychological projections, manifestations of our collective fear. Skeptics argue it's all sleep paralysis, mass hysteria, or online storytelling gone viral. But there's one thing they can't explain. The same eyes, the same feelings of dread, same silence after they vanish. Whether they're real or not, the black-eyed children speak to something ancient inside of us, a fear of what pretends to be innocent, of things that knock in the night, asking for permission to come closer. Would you open the door?
What the? Are they? I kind of missed it, but I swore they were gonna hit each other. What is that? Yo, where'd that go? Yeah, sure, but bring the camera out and you disappear. What the f is that? Completely gone.
Since I was a little girl, I have always been fascinated with Scottish and Ireland folklore. I love fairies. I always have. I actually have fairy wings on my back. But we've been lied to. Fairies are not delicate little wish granters with glittery wings and Etsy vibes. In Irish and Scottish lore, they're closer to the nature's mafia. Beautiful, terrifying, and always watching. Welcome to Nightly Haven. Tonight takes you to the windswept isles and misty highlands, where tales of the fae folk aren't bedtime stories. In Irish and Scottish Gaelic traditions, the Aos Sai aren't just fairies. They're descendants of ancient gods, the Tuatha de Danann, who were driven underground when humans took over the land. Now they dwell inside a burial mounds, also called fairy forts. Step inside one, that's your last dance with mortality. Oh, you thought it was just a scenic hill? Cute. That's sacred ground. Pee there and the Aos Sai might curse your bloodline so hard your future great-grandkids are born unlucky. You've seen them. Those little rings of mushrooms nestled in the grass. Adorable, right? Wrong. Those are fairy rings, and they're nature's version of a velvet rope in the underworld. Step inside and you risk being spirited away to the fairy realm. And time doesn't work right there. You might spend the night partying with the fae and come back to find 100 years have passed. And everyone you love is dead. Cheers. Did your baby suddenly look different? A little off? No worries. It might just be a changeling, a fairy child swapped in for your human one. Why? Maybe your baby was beautiful. Maybe the fairies were bored. Maybe they just wanted to ruin your week. In Scottish lore, some believe that you could expose a changeling by tossing it in a fire. If it screamed in a demonic voice and flew up the chimney, congrats, you were right. If it didn't, yikes. Not all fairies are tiny. Some are tall, elegant, glowing, and absolutely merciless. Called the gentry, these high-ranking fae appear human but are said to ride out at night, punishing those who disrespect them. Accidentally knock over a fairy tree or build a road through their sacred land? They don't file complaints. They just ruin your crops, break your bones, or make you waste away, smiling all the while you go mad. The remote islands off Scotland, Skye, Orkney, Shetland, harbor their own breed of fairy tales. Enter the Selkies, sea fairies who wear seal skins and seduce humans, only to vanish back into the sea, leaving broken hearts and sometimes broken minds. And let's not forget the Beanseed, the Banshee. Technically a fairy, but instead of granting wishes, she wails before death. If you hear her cry, you're home? Someone's not making it to breakfast. Fairies were never meant to be cute. They were wild, untamed spirits of the earth, of mist, of death, of mystery. Folk didn't leave offerings for fun. They did it to stay alive. So go ahead, believe in fairies. Just don't whistle in the woods. Don't pick that mushroom ring, and whatever you do, don't say you don't believe. They hate that. This is Nightly Haven, where even the smallest wings can cast the longest shadows. If you made it this far without being whisked away by the Fae, congratulations. You're tougher than most villagers. If you enjoyed dancing on the edge of folklore's darker side, don't forget to like this video. Every thumbs up keeps the channel at bay and is greatly appreciated. Subscribe to Nightly Haven for more tales that whisper while you sleep. And share this with someone who still thinks fairies are cute little wish machines. Because remember, not all wings flutter. Some stalk and some bite. This was Nightly Haven. Have a spooky night, friends. Bye. Hi, welcome to Nightly Haven, and tonight we're going to deep dive into giants. What if giants weren't just myths, but memories? What if their bones were buried, their names erased, but their bloodlines still walk among us today? From the ancient scriptures to forbidden caves, to that cousin who's suspiciously 7'3" with zero explanation. Tonight, we unravel the colossal mystery. Were giants real? Are their remains hidden? And could some of us be their descendants? Every ancient culture tells the same story. Beings of massive size, godlike power, and often terrifying appetites. In the Bible, Genesis 6:4 describes the Nephilim. They were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of gods came into the daughters of men. In Greek mythology, we had the Titans, primordial giants overthrown by Olympian gods. In Norse myths, feared the Jotun, or frost giants who warred with Asgard. And among Native American tribes, legends tell of towering red-haired cannibals who once roamed North America before being hunted down and sealed into caves. These aren't isolated tales. They're echoes, worldwide whispers of something too big to forget. Now, let's talk about the strangest oops, we lost it moment in archaeological history. The 1909 Grand Canyon discovery. The Arizona Gazette reported that a man named G.E. Kincaid, sponsored by the Smithsonian, stumbled upon a hidden cave filled with massive humanoid skeletons, Egyptian-style artifacts, hieroglyphics, and what looked like a giant tomb system. That exact site, now restricted government land. You can't hike it. You can't fly over it, and every official record vanished faster than your motivation on a Monday. Why? Safety, they say. But locals and independent researchers believe it's more about secrets than safety. I mean, come on. The entirety of the Grand Canyon is completely unsafe. What makes that area more unsafe than others? And maybe bones that could rewrite history. Still think giants were just fairy tales? In Peru and Ecuador, oversized skeletal remains up to 9 feet tall have been unearthed, quickly scooped up or lost before proper documentation. In Sardinia, ancient stone tombs called Tombs of the Giants line the hillside. Locals swear they belong to the lost race of Colossi. In Ireland, the legend of the Finn McCool tells of a giant who built the Giant's Causeway to fight a Scottish titan. In Russia, deep cave expeditions in the Urals turned up massive humanoid bones in government intervention. Almost every continent has stories, but for some reason, no museum has bones. Funny how that works. And here's where things get weird, like Thanksgiving with your ex weird. What if giants didn't go extinct? They just shrank. Some theorists believe exceptionally tall people today may be genetic echoes of ancient giants. Not the 6'5" basketball player down the street, we're talking the 7+ footers with no growth conditions, no medical explanation, just unusually tall families generation after generation. A few examples. A certain royal European bloodlines have documented extraordinary height across centuries. Some native tribes still whisper that the tall ones never vanished, they just changed. Even isolated areas of Asia and Eastern Europe, there are lineages with consistent abnormal height and strange skeletal anomalies. Are they the diluted descendants of the Nephilim, or just the leftovers of a genetic history we've tried to erase? Either way, it might explain why some people feel a little larger than life. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather the 12-foot tall skeleton in the room. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, newspapers across the US reported massive skeletons being discovered. Kentucky, Ohio, New York, Arizona all claimed finds of giants ranging from 7 to 12 feet tall. Many of the remains were sent to, you guessed it, the Smithsonian. And just like that, gone. No records, no bones, no press releases. Just theories and missing pieces. Some whistleblowers claim the Smithsonian cleaned house on anomalies remains to preserve accepted evolutionary timelines because nothing says scientific integrity like selective evidence, right? Back to the Bible. The Nephilim weren't the only ones. In Deuteronomy 3:11 mentions King of Bashan, whose bed was over 13 feet long. And of course, Goliath, a nearly 10-foot warrior taken down by David's sling. But here's the thing. Goliath wasn't the only one. The Bible also mentions his giant brothers. Some scholars argue that these remnants of hybrid bloodlines, ancient beings caught between heaven and earth, never truly human, makes you wonder what happened to their offspring. So, were giants real? Ancient texts say yes. Cultures across the world say yes. Newspaper archives say yes. And restricted Grand Canyon zones whisper absolutely. Maybe they're not stomping through the forest or building pyramids anymore. Maybe they're just buried beneath government land or quietly walking among us, tall shadows of a world we tried to forget. So the next time you meet someone whose height defies explanation, whose eyes seem older than time, you might just be looking at a descendant of the forgotten. If this is something you're into, like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. If you're ready to storm the gates of forbidden knowledge and tell us, have you ever encountered something giant? Until next time, stay curious, stay strange, and stay nightly. Have a good night, guys. Bye. Welcome back, night crawlers. Tonight on Nightly Haven, we're headed deep into the frost-bitten forest of North America, where the trees whisper in dead tongues and the wind carries stories soaked in blood. This is a tale of the Wendigo, a creature born of hunger, isolation, and the kind of winter that cracks your bones. A beast of Algonquian legend that may still stalk the dark pines, looking for its next snack. So grab a blanket, maybe a holy symbol or two, and for the love of all that's sacred, don't get snowed in. Because once the Wendigo's hunger awakens, it never stops. Rewind the clock. Pre-colonial North America, the bitter northern territories, long before Wi-Fi and DoorDash. The Wendigo legend comes from various speaking tribes, including the Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Innu. They are all described as tall creatures with sunken eyes, rotting skin, and a voice like the cracking of dead wood. But here's the thing, the Wendigo isn't your average monster. It's not just a what, it's a why. It is a spirit of hunger, specifically cannibalistic greed, the kind that takes root when survival turns savagery. When man eats man, the Wendigo appears, or worse, becomes you. In many versions, the Wendigo was once human, a person so desperate, so corrupted, they resorted to cannibalism and were cursed for it. Not dead, not alive, just starving forever. Honestly, the ultimate anti-snacking PSA, eat your neighbor during a blizzard, become a 12-foot winter ghoul with no lips and a mouthful of regrets? Cool. That's getting edited out. Descriptions vary by tribe and storyteller. Some say it's skeletal and corpse-like, with flesh pulled tight across its bone, eyes glowing like embers. Others describe antlers or a deer skull for a head. A modern Hollywood mutation that, while not traditional, is now part of pop culture Wendigo imagery. Think Until Dawn, Hannibal, Supernatural, you name it, the deer skulls makes an appearance. But the OG Wendigo? Human, cursed, mutated by hunger and winter. It is said to have a heart made of ice, moves impossibly fast, and speaks with the voices of those it has devoured. Imagine walking through a blizzard and hearing your dead sister's voice calling for the woods. Yeah, good luck sleeping tonight. Now, here's where things get even darker. Yes, darker than human jerky. There's a condition known as Wendigo psychosis. Real term, documented cases, mostly historical, we hope. It's when someone becomes obsessed with eating human flesh even when other food is available. Some believe it's the Wendigo spirit whispering in their ear. Others say it's severe mental illness triggered by starvation, isolation, or trauma. Early settlers and missionaries recorded accounts of individuals, especially during harsh winters, who went mad, feared they were turning into Wendigos, or began acting like one. Sometimes they were executed before they could harm others. In other cases, well, let's just say the evidence was hard to chew through. Honestly, colonial Canada, not exactly known for its chill therapy sessions. Now, let's fast forward to the 19th and 20th century when legends turned headlines. One infamous case, Swift Runner, a Cree trapper in the 1870s. He lived near Edmonton, Alberta. After getting snowed in for the winter, he emerged in spring alone. Turns out, he ate his entire family, wife, 6 children, even his brother. He had access to emergency food supplies. He could have made it, but he didn't. When arrested, he blamed the Wendigo. So, was it an excuse or possession? Either way, Swift Runner was hanged and the legend grew stronger. And today, there are still reports. Hikers hear voices in the woods. Hunters vanish without a trace. Cree elders still warn that Wendigo during harsh winters. And every time a frost hits deep and food runs low, the whispers return. Let's be real, myth or metaphor, the Wendigo represents something terrifying, the monster within. It's greed, gluttony, the way humans consume without limit, whether it's food, power, or TikTok followers. It's also a warning, a moral compass. Break the sacred law of community and survival, you risk losing your humanity. But hey, some legends are legends for a reason. Maybe the Wendigo isn't a metaphor. Maybe it's waiting in the snow, watching. After all,
monsters love cold leftovers. If you like the deep freeze into cannibalistic folklore, hit the like, subscribe, and sacrifice a marshmallow to the algorithm. Share this with your bravest friend and drop a comment below. Do you think the Wendigo is real or just a dark tale told by firelight? Either way, keep your fire burning, stay out of the woods, and remember, the hunger you feel might not be your own. Until next time, night crawlers, stay strange. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, inky black loch in the Scottish Highlands. Mist clings to the water like a secret unwilling to be told. The wind carries whispers that feel older than time itself. And somewhere far below the rippling surface, something moves. For centuries, Loch Ness has guarded its greatest mystery, a creature the world has come to know simply as Nessie. Some say she's a relic from prehistoric age, a living plesiosaur gliding silently in the dark. Others call her a legend, a trick of the light, or an elaborate hoax. But no matter where you stand on this debate, the sightings, the stories, and the strange evidence just refuse to fade away. Welcome to Nightly Haven. Today we are diving deep into the history, the science, the theories, and the other watery corners of the world where Nessie's cousins may still roam. Now, Loch Ness isn't just any lake. At over 22 miles long and more than 750 feet deep in places, it holds more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. The water is thick with peat, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet down. If you want to hide something, or if something wanted to hide from you, this would be the perfect place. While the Loch Ness Monster's fame skyrocketed in the 20th century, the first recorded sightings dated back to the 6th century. Saint Columba, an Irish monk, was said to have encountered a water beast in the River Ness in 565 AD. According to legend, the creature attacked a man and Columba commanded it back into the depths. Whether this was a miracle, a myth, or the first documented encounter with Nessie is still up for debate. Scottish folklore is filled with tales of kelpies, shape-shifting water spirits often taking the form of horses, that haunted lochs and rivers. Was Nessie just a modern retelling of an ancient water demon, or was there something truly alive lurking there all along? The modern Nessie craze began in 1933 when a local couple claimed they saw a large creature crossing the road towards the loch. This story hit the Inverness Courier newspaper, sparking national attention. Soon after came one of the most famous pieces of alleged evidence in cryptozoology, the surgeon's photograph. In 1934, it showed what appeared to be a long neck and small head rising from the water. For decades, the single image was the iconic face of Nessie, until 1994 when it was revealed to be a hoax involving a toy submarine and some clever photography. But by then, Nessie's legend had already cemented itself into popular culture. Now, many believe, myself included, point to the plesiosaur theory. Plesiosaurs were marine reptiles from the Mesozoic era, with long necks, small heads, and large flippers, strikingly similar to many eyewitness descriptions of Nessie. Critics argue that the plesiosaurs were saltwater creatures and likely couldn't survive in the freshwater loch. But others counter with the possibility of adaptation over millions of years.
Some sonar scans of Loch Ness have shown unexplained large objects moving underwater. Could they be living relics, descendants of creatures that somehow survived the mass extinction? It's a thrilling possibility, and one science hasn't fully ruled out. Not all explanations are as exciting. Skeptics suggest sightings could be floating logs, seals, large eels, or optical illusions caused by wind and waves. In 2019, researchers tested DNA samples from Loch Ness and found no evidence of plesiosaurs, but they did find a surprising amount of eel DNA. Could Nessie be a massive eel species we have yet to discover? And of course, there's always the chance that part of Nessie's fame comes from human imagination. Hoaxes, misidentification, and the human love of mystery have all played their part. And I certainly hope not, because I love Nessie. Now, Loch Ness isn't the only place with monster problems. Around the world, similar sightings pop up. Morag in Scotland's Loch Morar said to be even more aggressive than Nessie. Champ, which is very popular in the USA, and Lake Champlain, with sightings going back to Native American legends. Ogopogo in Canada's Okanagan Lake revered a First Nations lore as protective water spirits. The similarities are striking. Long necks, humps, large size, and an uncanny ability to vanish without a trace. Are these just parallel myths, or proof that something ancient is hiding in the world's waters? Whether Nessie is a prehistoric survivor, a giant eel, or a beautiful story kept alive by those who love a good mystery, her legend has brought the world together in wonder. People have traveled from every corner of the globe just for a chance to see a ripple in the water, and maybe, just maybe, catch a glimpse of the impossible. Loch Ness remains dark, deep, and patient, and if something is down there, it's not in a hurry to be found. So what do you believe? Is Nessie a plesiosaur, a shape-shifting kelpie, or nothing more than the best story Scotland ever told? One thing is for certain, the loch keeps her secrets well, and somewhere in that cold, black water, the truth still awaits. If you enjoyed our dive into the depths tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And maybe keep your camera ready the next time you're near a lonely stretch of water. You never know what might surface. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Forget Disney. Tonight we dive into the chilling world of mermaids, the mysterious half-human, half-fish beings that haunt oceans, rivers, and legends across the globe. From ancient goddesses Artemis to African water queens like Mami Wata, from Haiti's La Sarine and Zimbabwe's mermaid-hunted dams, we'll explore centuries of myth, history, and yes, even modern eyewitness accounts and kidnapping stories. Were Columbus and Hudson really seeing mermaids, or were they just squinting at some manatees? Do spirits like Niju and Jingu still pull people under? And why did an entire city of Israel offer $1 million for proof of a mermaid? Science says no. Culture says yes. History says you were probably drunk. Either way, mermaids just won't let go. You know what's funny? For centuries, humans have claimed they've spotted half-naked ladies with flowing hair, glistening tails, and voices like honey. And somehow they always forget they were stranded at sea for 6 months, half-starved, or maybe confusing a manatee for Miss Universe. Tonight, we are plunging into the world of mermaids. Not the ones who sing with crabs and marry princes, but the ones who supposedly drag you under. From African water queens to Haitian sea goddesses, from Columbus's questionable eyesight to modern kidnapping rumors. So grab your snorkel because things are about to get fishy. Our first stop, ancient Syria. Meet Artemis, part goddess, part fish. All drama. According to legend, she loved a mortal. Tragedy struck and she hurled herself into a lake. Boom. Mermaid. Ancient relief shows her with a fishtail century before Hans Christian Andersen is even a twinkle in his mother's eye. Meanwhile, the Greeks had sirens, originally bird women who lulled sailors with songs. Somewhere along the way, feathers molded into scales, and then suddenly, voila! We've got half-fish seductresses. Monks in the Middle Ages doubled down, sketching her with a comb and mirror. Basically, medieval Instagram influence warning you about vanity. And then comes the explorers. Columbus in 1493 saw mermaids near Hispaniola, then admitted they were not as beautiful as were painted. Translation, oops, it was a manatee. My bad. Henry Houghton in 1608 claimed the same. Woman on top, porpoise on bottom. Either way, seas were swarming with mermaids, or 17th century men really needed better glasses. Which is a possibility. Now forget the pale little mermaids singing about forks. In Africa, mermaids are powerful, terrifying, and worshipped to this day. The queen of them all, Mami Wata, mother of water. She's part goddess, part spirit, sometimes part snake, and fully capable of changing your life. Or ending it. Mami Wata shows up everywhere. Paintings, masks, shrines, even nightclub posters. She's blessed us with wealth and healing if you're respectful. But anger her and you might get snatched into the underwater palace. Some people call it kidnapping, others call it spiritual initiation. Either way, if you disappear in the riverbank, nobody's blaming faulty life jackets. They're blaming her. And it's not just in West Africa. In Zimbabwe, the Shona people tell of the Nishiju. In Cameroon, it's the Jingu. They're guardians, healers, and fun fact, they're still headline major festivals. The annual Nganda Festival in Douala literally features offerings to the water spirits with oracles delivered straight from the river. Picture Mardi Gras, but your parade float is an actual river goddess. And here's where folklore hits the front page. In 2012, Zimbabwean dam workers flat out refused to keep working. Dead serious. Why? They said mermaids were harassing them. Machines breaking, eerie encounters on the water. The government had to call in traditional leaders to perform the appeasement rituals. Yes, state infrastructure projects literally ground to a halt because of mermaids. Over Haiti, mermaids wear crowns. Enter La Sarine, one of Ewa of voodoo. She is beautiful, regal, and depending on who you ask, dangerously jealous. As consort to Agwe, ruler of the sea, she commands respect. Her symbols, mirrors, pearls, flowing hair, basically a pine interest board come to life. But she's no fairy tale. Believers talk about dreams of being summoned, taken beneath the waves, gifted wealth or music. Disrespect her? Well,
let's just say swimming lessons won't save you. For Haitians, La Sirene isn't a myth, it's faith. You'll see her on the altars, in processions, and whispered about in markets. Outsiders call it folklore, insiders call it a Tuesday. Mermaids didn't retire with the Middle Ages, they just got better PR. In Israel 2009, locals in Kiryat Yam swore they saw a mermaid leaping at dusk. The city council even offered a $1 million reward for proof. No one collected, but hey, tourism is skyrocketing. Zimbabwe, 2012. Remember those dam workers? Still one of the best modern mermaid news stories ever. Construction crews brought to their knees by something older than hard hats. And then there's Animal Planet's fake documentary Mermaids, The Body Found in 2012. It blurred fact and fiction so well that the NOAA, yes, the actual U.S. Ocean Agency, had to release a statement: no evidence of aquatic humanoids has ever been found. Imagine being so convincing that the government has to step in and say, guys, chill. Mermaids aren't real. Now let's stir the pot a little with a spooky one. Mermaid kidnappings. In Africa, the Caribbean, stories abound of people taken beneath the water, sometimes return transformed, sometimes never at all. To outsiders, it sounds like a horror movie material. To insiders, it's spiritual reality. In Haitian voodoo, in Zimbabwe's Nju tales, in Cameroon's Jingu traditions, I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of that, being taken is part cautionary tale, part cosmic initiation. Here's the kicker. You won't find a police file labeled suspect mermaid crime kidnapping. Most vanishings attributed to mermaids are drownings, disappearances, or moral lessons wrapped in a story. Still, if you're near a river in Zimbabwe and someone says, don't swim there, the mermaids take people, are you really gonna argue? I'm not. If you want to go mermaid hunting, metaphorically, please don't use harpoons on anything. Here are your hot spots. La Sirene reigns in voodoo practice. Africa, Mami Wata and Nishu Jingu, with festivals and shrines still alive today. The Caribbean and South America, Watch Your Mama in Suriname and Guyana, Yamea in Cuba and Brazil. In Europe, medieval bestiaries, mermaid carvings on churches, sailor ballads about drowned lovers. Modern oddities, Kiryat Yam's $1 million bounty. Basically, wherever there's water and humans, there's mermaids. So let's cut the net. Science says no evidence ever. NOAA is very clear. History says sailors were lonely and manatees don't look bad when you've been at sea for 6 months. Culture says mermaids are alive and well in art, ritual, religion, and in the way people interpreted danger. So are mermaids real? If you mean scaly supermodels, sorry, probably not. If you mean real in how humans shape meaning around water, absolutely. So next time when you're by the water and you hear singing, maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's someone with a tail and a grudge. If you got a mermaid story, Haiti, Zimbabwe, or your grandma's fishing tales, drop it in the comments below. And if you want me to dive deeper into these Nju initiations or that $1 million sighting in Israel, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Till then, stay curious, stay cautious, and maybe avoid late night skinny dippings. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Out here in the dense Pennsylvania woodlands, especially through the echoing hollows of the Alleghenies and the silent bridges of Central County, the forest has a name. It calls itself the Minnehaha or the Tonanesta or Spring Creek Canyon, but the locals, they just call it Squatch County. Pennsylvania is no stranger to Sasquatch lore. Far from the misty Pacific Northwest, the Keystone State harbors a wild, whispering tradition of Bigfoot, or a sense of old hunters would say, the wild men of the Susquehanna Ridge. Early reports from the 1800s spoke of hairy, enormous wild men in the forest of northern Pennsylvania, dating back to the settlers who claimed something lumbered beyond their campsites. As Bigfoot research became popular in the 20th century, Pennsylvania racked up dozens of sightings. According to one survey, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, has recorded over 130 and possibly more Bigfoot reports in Pennsylvania, including recent ones in March of 2025. The hotspots include Central County, remember Spring Creek Canyon, the Allegheny National Forest, Fayette County, and stretches of the Appalachian Wilds. Why Pennsylvania? Because the terrain is perfect. Thick forests, deep hollows, creek valleys, and wilderness that can swallow even the sound of footsteps. Trails like Spring Creek Canyon, Tenosa Creek, and the Buffalo Creek Backwoods give just enough hush and shadow for something large, silent, and unseen to roam. And I can testify to this because I grew up in Pennsylvania and the woods are very dense. Now, let's zoom in on the March of 2025 Pennsylvania Bigfoot flurry, where things got weird, loud, and personal. The knock on the Spring Creek Canyon on March 6, 2025, an experienced hiker, Todd McPherson, reported a startling series of wood knocks while hiking the Spring Creek Canyon Trail, just northeast of the Penn State University Fish Hatchery. He described it like this. At roughly 9 a.m., just past the fish hatchery, he heard a sharp knock, like an axe handle hitting wood. He paused, scanned the woods uphill for him for about 30 seconds. Nothing. He took a couple more steps, then another knock, exactly the same. He froze and looked uphill. After about 2 minutes, he heard something large moving through the brush and woods, running uphill away from him, but he never saw anything. The unusual part, Todd later noted that another Bigfoot report from February 2025, very close in location, almost overlapping his trail area, which suggests this spot is an ongoing activity. Another BFRO report from February 2025, hunting area 3.5 miles northeast of Penn State, mentioned a good visual sighting, Class A, in roughly the same terrain. In Fayette County, not far from the Allegheny Ridges, another reported Bigfoot sighting stirred conversion. A figure walking along the trail, disappearing into the trees, once spotted by a passing cyclist. A National Weather Service storm damage survey photographer even captured what appeared to be a shape of a large, upright figure in the woods, though officials later cautioned it might be a staged silhouette or prank. These overlapping reports, knocks, visuals, strange movements, combine to give you Centre County and Fayette County a renewed reputation as Pennsylvania's Squatch territory. Now, let's build a few dramatized witness stories based on real reports, interviews, and cryptid lore. These are story-style recollections inspired by real reports from Pennsylvania Foot archives. I thought it was a deer until it locked eyes with me. A solo hiker, let's call her Mara, is hiking along an overgrown path when she pauses by the creek to rest. She scans the opposite bank expecting a deer or maybe a raccoon.
but instead sees a massive form, dark brown fur, hunched but upright, limbs thicker than any deer's, and turning slowly to look directly at her. The creature steps into the light for a moment, and Mara swears she sees a large human-like feet before it lumbers back into the trees. Mara flees, but later returns with prints, footprints at least 14 inches long, with deep impressions that lead off towards boggy ground. Her camera never quite caught the creature, but the tracks remain. She called the BFRO. The story spread locally. The hiker later deleted the digital photo, claiming the image changed when zoomed, just a smear. Others said the prints vanished when it rained the next night. Knocks start after the storm. A group of storm survivors clearing debris after heavy rainfall in Central County. After clearing a cluster of fallen trees, they began hearing wood knocks. First distant, then much closer. One surveyor, Jim, paused near a stand of pines and said he heard something, like a tap, 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 tap. Loud, rhythmic, almost like slow Morse code. The knocks moved from the tree to tree, traveling uphill until abruptly stopped. Jim said something was watching from the ridge. When he turned, he briefly saw a shadow at least 8 feet tall moving between the trunks. But as soon as he raised his camera, it vanished. One of the survivors later claimed he found large hair tufts, dark and coarse, snagged on a pine branch. But by the time Bigfoot investigators arrived, the tufts were gone, allegedly removed by forest workers thinking they were just trash. The knocks, however, they kept repeating. 2 fishermen in a drift boat recall hearing a piercing howl from deep in the forest. Not quite like a coyote, not quite like a bear. One of them says it sounded almost human, but wet and gurgling, a deep guttural scream that faded into something like a sob. Moments later, they smelled a strong, foul odor, rotting meat mixed with wet fur and something metallic. They turned on their flashlights and saw no eyeshine, but something large sloshed through the reeds and vanished. When they exited the boat, they found large, wet footprints in the muddy bank, 16 inches in length, wide with deep heel impressions, and the smell lingered for hours. Later, they swore their car smelled off, like the strange forest odor even after they washed it. The prints slowly faded as the mud dried. One of them still insists it wasn't a bear. It walked upright. These kind of encounters, combining sight, sound, smell, footprints, and a deep instinctive feeling of being watched or followed, are typically of Bigfoot stories in Pennsylvania, especially in areas like the Alleghenies, Central County, and forested creek valleys. Of course, no Bigfoot tales is complete without the skeptics. Pennsylvania Bigfoot lore is full of alternate explanation, hoaxes and misidentification, and sometimes outright pranks. The National Weather Service Bigfoot photo from Fayette County, March 2025, was quickly dismissed by officials as possibly a staged figure or prank, and locals noted that there are yard Sasquatch statues placed in forests just to troll hikers. Many skeptics point to black bears standing on hind legs, or fallen logs, or shadow illusions as explanations for fleeting Bigfoot sightings. Without a body, skeleton, or verified genetic material, very few cryptozoologists are wholly convinced. As one Pennsylvania Bigfoot investigator put it, "Show me a skeleton or carcass and then I'll be convinced." Some Bigfoot tracks or wood knocks have been traced back to deliberate hoaxes, people building Bigfoot pranks, slapping trees with tools, or leaving fake fur behind on branches to lure cryptid hobbyists. Still, even skeptics admit that Pennsylvania's terrain is perfect for misidentification, thick forests, echoing hollows, hidden ravines, and the kind of topography that can swallow sound and light, creating illusions that stick in your mind long after you left. But Bigfoot in Pennsylvania isn't just a modern cryptid. It hangs over local folklore like a long shadow. In Chestnut Ridge, Dairy Ridge area, there are long running tales of wild men or wild hare giants roaming the hills. The legends of the wild man often intersects with the Appalachian ghost stories. Hikers hear footsteps in the night or drums echoing in the canyons and assume something supernatural is at work. Some stories tell of white Bigfoot or pale Sasquatch figures seen in Beaver County, sometimes described almost ghost-like, white fur, glowing red eyes, or fading into mist. These tales blur lines between Bigfoot and spectral entities and sometimes gets folded into local ghost lore. Sam Sherry, a fisherman along with Loyalhanna Creek, claimed a Bigfoot encounter in the 1980s. Later in his life, he became a local Bigfoot advocate. His stories and the creek itself have become focal points to Squatch hunters. Pennsylvania hosts Bigfoot-themed events, the Forest County Bigfoot Festival in Marineville, the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure, and camp-out tours that lean into both myth and investigation. These events underscore how Bigfoot has become woven into the identity of the PA wilds. The tension here is rich. Bigfoot is both a creature of horror stories and a local mascot, a ghost in the woods and a folk symbol, something folks are equally afraid of and excited to see. Nightly Haven thrives in that tension. It was a crisp March morning, sunlight just filtering through bare branches. Todd McPherson stepped into the Spring Creek Canyon north of Penn State Fish Hatchery, boots crunching in the hard frost leaves. He paused by the stream, lifting his binoculars, listening to the rush of the Spring Creek, and then tap. A sharp knock echoed uphill, clear and hollow, as if someone struck a dry log with a stick. Todd froze. He peered into the hillside, nothing but trees. He chalked it up to falling limb or maybe a hunter upstream. He walked on. 2 steps. Tap again. This time, the sound was closer, heavier. He turned slowly to look uphill. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Minutes passed. Then, crack. Crack, crack. The brush broke high on the slope. Something heavy moved, rushed away from him. Todd felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He clicked his phone's camera, half expecting to catch a glimpse, but the woods were silent again and empty. He walked out, heart pounding, replaying the sound in his head. Later, he would return to investigators and find nothing. No prints, no hair, nothing, except the memory of those knocks and the feeling that something was out there watching him. This wasn't a fleeting hunch. This was a warning. The forest remembers. So, what if Pennsylvania does hide a population of Bigfoot? What would that mean? Let's go full Nightly Haven speculative mode for this moment, weaving in theories and real cryptozoology speculations. So, the remnant population theory, some cryptids theorists suggest Bigfoot could be a relict population of Gigantopithecus, or I know I messed that up, or other massive hominid, or a parallel species that managed to survive unseen in isolated wilderness. Pennsylvania rugged terrain and low human density in certain pockets make it plausible for such a species to remain hidden. Now, Bigfoot might have become nocturnal or crepuscular in response to human presence, avoiding daylight, staying to ridges, creeks, and deep hollows. Forest knocks, branches break, and echoes could be territorial signaling, calls, warnings, or communications between individuals. Many witnesses describe wood knocks, howls, or branch slaps before sightings. Some reports of strong, unpleasant odors, wet fur, rotting meat, skunk-like musk suggest Bigfoot could have scent glands or hygiene habits very different from known mammals.
So why don't we have any corpses or bones? Well, one of the biggest arguments against Sasquatch is the lack of bodies and physical remains. Some theories suggest that Bigfoot may bury its dead, or that carcasses deteriorate quickly in wet, acidic forest soil. Others suggest scavenging by animals or insects could remove remains before humans ever find them. Alternatively, Bigfoot might not die naturally in the forest, but retreat to caves, rivers, or other locations not typically frequented by people. Some Bigfoot storytellers hint that Sasquatch may use rudimentary tools, sticks, branches, or rocks to make noises, knocks on trees, or leave signs. This could explain the knock reports, Bigfoot testing territory, tapping hollow logs, or communicating with others. Others speculate Bigfoot might have learned to observe or even avoid humans, modifying its behavior to stay hidden, watching hikers, then ducking back into the forest. If Bigfoot is real, Pennsylvania forest regions, the Allegheny National Forest, Keonesta Creek Valley, Spring Creek Canyon, and the ridges overlooking game lands are prime territory. It would mean that the Squatch is not just a Pacific myth, but a creature adapted to the Appalachian ecosystem. It would also reframe the numerous wood knock and vocalization reports not as a fringe or hoax events, but as legitimate signs of communication, territory marking, or even warning calls. Finally, it would push us into reevaluate old stories of the wild men. In Pennsylvania, folklore not as legend alone, but as possibly rooted in real encounters with unknown animals. So as we wrap this up, let's return to the hush of the forest, the sound of the wind through the bare branches, and those knocks. Tap, 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 tap. In the hush of Pennsylvania morning, sometimes all it takes is one knock to shift your entire world. A tap on a tree, a branch that snaps in midair, a shadow glimpsed between trunks, and suddenly you remember that the wild is never truly quiet, because the wild man is still out there, still watching, still knocking, still waiting. This has been Nightly Haven, and if you like stuff like this and stories of cryptoids or mysteries or true crime, subscribe, share, like, comment. I appreciate you guys, and you guys have a great night. Bye.
Dragons. They are the ultimate monster of myth, the apex predator of imagination. If cryptids are the underdogs of mystery, then dragons are the heavyweight champions. But here's the thing, every culture in the world has a dragon story. Not a few, not just one, but everywhere. From China to Scotland, from the jungles of Africa to the deserts of the Middle East, legends of giant, winged, fire-breathing reptiles have burned their way into our history. But why? Tonight, we are diving deep. Could dragons have really existed? Did ancient people encounter something more than fossils? And even more chilling, could dragons still be hiding in our world today? Grab your lanterns, because this rabbit hole is full of smoke and scale. Let's start at the beginning. China, the land of the imperial dragon. Unlike the fearsome treasure-hoarding beasts of Europe, Chinese dragons are symbols of wisdom, luck, and power. Emperors trace their lineage to dragons, claiming divine right through them. Festivals still celebrate them, statues honor them, and for thousands of years, the dragon was not just a myth. It was a cultural backbone. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Norse sagas told of Fafnir, a cursed man turned into a dragon, greedy, venomous, and nearly invincible. Medieval Europe wasn't so kind to their dragons. These were beasts of chaos, embodiments of Satan, often slain by noble knights and saints of shining armor. In South America, the Aztecs worship Quetzalcoatl. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The feathered serpent god of wind and wisdom. Unlike the greedy European monsters, he was a bringer of knowledge. But stop and think, how did people with no contact all invent the same creature? Giant reptiles, scales, wings, sometimes breathing fire. Coincidence or a collective memory of something real? Scholars often wave off dragons as simple mistakes. Early people found dinosaur bones and said, "Ah, yes, terrifying monster. Makes sense, right?" But let's not forget, the bones don't breathe fire. The fossils don't swoop down from the sky, and the legends aren't about long dead creatures. They're about living, hunting, dangerous ones. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, claimed Egyptian priests showed him preserved remains of winged serpents in the desert. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about giant serpents in India that strangled elephants. These weren't stories about fossils. These were encounters. Now, fast forward through history and people kept seeing dragons. In the 1500s, a Swiss naturalist named Conrad Gessner cataloged a dragon in his zoological works. He wasn't joking. He treated it as a real animal. In 1572, villagers of Bologna, Italy, swore a small dragon slithered out of a cave and into their farmland. They killed it, preserved the body, and scholars studied it. In England, stories of the Worm of Lambton described a dragon-like beast wrapped around a river, devouring livestock, growing larger by the day. And then there's the modern reports. In Congo in the 1930s and 40s, missionaries, explorers whispered of the Kamamoto, a winged beast resembling a petrosaur. The locals featured it, describing it as a dragon that attacked canoes at night. China, 1944, a U.S. pilot allegedly shot down a massive winged reptile during World War II. Some claim the body was taken for study and never seen again. Surprise, surprise. Texas, 1976, a spate of dragon-like flying reptile sightings shook the Rio Grande Valley. Witnesses swore it had leathery wings, a long tail, and glowing red eyes. Are these dragons surviving dinosaurs, or just a human tendency to see monsters in the shadows? Let's play scientist for a minute. Could a dragon actually work biologically? I mean, first off, wings. For a reptile the size of a housefly, it would need massive bird-like bone structure, light but strong. Petrosaurs pulled this off, so it's not impossible. Now the fire-breathing question, how could that even work? Well, bombardier beetles already create chemical explosions in their bodies, firing boiling liquid as a defense. Electric eels generate enough voltage to stun predators. Even the humble skunk sprays chemicals strong enough to blind an attacker. So imagine a reptile with gas-producing organs in its throat. One spark, one chemical reaction, and suddenly the idea of a fire-breathing dragon isn't fantasy, it's chemistry. One of the most strangest dragon tropes, though, is their obsession with hoarding gold. Why? Some psychologists say it's symbolic. Dragons represent human greed. Others argue maybe it has roots in reality. Could dragons have been attracted to shiny objects the way crows are today? Did people stash their treasures in caves only to lose them to giant predators that claim the caves as their own? Or was it just a metaphor? After all, what greater monster is there than greed itself? And here's the spicy take. What if dragons didn't go extinct, but were hunted into hiding? Ancient humans feared them, fought them, told stories of slaying them. Over centuries, the population dwindled. Some conspiracy theories even suggest governments know about dragons, or even dragon-like creatures, and keep it quiet. Sounds wild, but remember, the giant squid was dismissed as legend for centuries until one washed ashore. So maybe one day a dragon corpse or a living one will be dragged out of the shadows. Until then, all we have is stories. Now let's take a world tour of dragon myths. Japan, the dragon god of the seas, said to live in a crystal palace beneath the waves. In India, the Naga serpent beings that dwelled underground, guarding treasures and wisdom. Scotland, Loch Ness Monster is often theorized as a dragon-type creature, a waterworm. Wales, the red dragon, is the national symbol tied to prophecy and kingship. Africa, a winged serpent is said to live in the waterfalls, causing storms when it flies. It seems like no matter where you go, the dragon is lurking, woven into folklore like smoke in the wind. And let's not kid ourselves, dragons the size of skyscrapers probably aren't hiding in the woods, but smaller, reclusive species? Possible. I mean, think about it. We still discover new species every year, including massive animals like whales, sharks, and even giant lizards. Whole ecosystems remain unexplored. Jungles, caves, and especially the deep ocean. Who's to say there isn't something dragon-like still lurking in places we haven't dared to look? So are dragons real? Were they ever real? Or are they the perfect marriage of fossil, fear, and imagination? Now here's my take. Myths don't cling to us for a millennia without a reason. Whether dragons live in flesh and blood or only in our nightmares, they've carved their place into the human story. And maybe somewhere out there, beyond the edge of science and certainty, something scaled still waits, silent, watching, and patient. Because if history has taught us anything, legends don't die, they wait. This has been Nightly Haven, where myths breathe fire. Have a good night, guys. Bye. Imagine a polished horn sitting in a royal treasury, scored with legends that it neutralized poison, cured madness, or secured the favor of kings. In medieval Europe, that object was a treasure, a spiraled horn of impossible length. But the horn didn't come from a horse. It came from the sea. The narwhal is a medium-sized Arctic whale whose nails grow a long, spiraled tooth that juts from the upper jaw like a spear. When the narwhal tusk reached markets in Europe, merchants sold them as unicorn horns, and monarchs believed it. Artifacts made from the narwhal tusk were cut into goblets and displayed as relics with miraculous reputation. The myth of the unicorn and the trade in narwhal tusks fed each other for centuries, until naturalists began to ask what creature exactly could produce such a thing. Why was a tooth mistaken for a horn? Because at a glance, a spiral tusk can look like a single horn, and because magical thinking spreads faster than natural history. Sailors and traders didn't have microscopes. They had stories. The tusk rarity and price only added to the mystique. Fun, slightly gross fact. The narwhal tusk is actually a tooth with sensory nerves, not a magic wand, but the story that grew around it, that's the kind of storytelling we're here to savor. In 1800s London, a dead, odd creature arrived from the antipodes, beak like a duck,
tail like a beaver, webbed feet, body fur, and if that wasn't enough, egg laying. European naturalists stared and said, "It's a hoax. Someone must have sewn a duck's bill into a mammal's body." When the first specimen reached Britain, scientists actually took scissors to it to look for the stitches of the prank. This wasn't just incredulity, it was honest confusion at an animal that seemed to break the rules. The platypus forced taxonomists to rethink how animals fit into categories because it fit into several at once. Imagine being a zoologist and opening a crate from Australia, expecting a kangaroo or a possum and pulling out something that looks like evolution was having a joke. The platypus would later be explained. It's a monotreme, an egg-laying mammal, and today we celebrate its oddness as one of the best examples of nature's capacity for invention. If you ever feel weird about being you, remember, nature will out-weird you any day. Some myths are born from absence, a fossilized skeleton that whispers of a beast that used to be. For decades, the coelacanth lived in the books of paleontologists and pages of museums, a creature of deep geological time that was supposed to have vanished with the dinosaurs. Then in December of 1938, South African museum curator named Marjorie Courtney Latimer recognized a strange fish hauled up by local travelers. Scientists confirmed it. A living coelacanth, a species once confined to stone, was caught in the net of the present. The coelacanth rewired how people think about extinction. Something declared dead by the fossil record 70 million years gone was very much alive, quietly inhabiting deep, cold pockets of the ocean. The rediscovery felt less like a correction and more like a whisper from prehistory saying, "I still exist." This is the category of legend where science catches up and reality is stranger than anyone expected. It's the living fossil story that's perfect for late night tales, ripped sails, monsters 100 feet long, tentacles that wrapped a hull and pulled men to the brine. For centuries, the kraken, a monstrous many-armed thing, proud storyteller sees. Only much later did naturalists begin to suspect a natural anchor for these tales. Giant squid and colossal squid are real, enormous cephalopods that live deep and rarely meet human eyes. Modern science suggests that giant squid encounters, carcasses, and the scars on sperm whales fed the legend of the kraken. Or it just could have been called by another name back then. Instead of squid, it was called kraken. People at sea had little else to explain the massive, unusual things floating or thrashing near a ship. Beaks the size of barrels, arms that might tangle ropes. These are real features of giant squid, giant cephalopods. Mix in moonlight, alcohol, and fear, and the kraken takes form. Good news though. You probably won't meet a kraken on your next yacht trip. Slightly bad news, those tentacles are still out there, writing their own old-timey stories in scars and squid ink. "Mermaid!" shouted the lookout. Tales of half-human, half-fish creatures appear in sailors' logs across the centuries, but many reported mermaid sightings were likely manatees or dugongs, slow, rotund marine mammals with human-like eyes and a curious posture when viewed from a rocking deck. Columbus himself reported mermaids. Later naturalists suggest misidentification of manatees by tired, land-hungry men at sea. The physical resemblance, combined with long voyages, longing, and imagination, helped produce mermaid lore that later became a fairy tale. Imagine months at sea staring at the horizon and then seeing a large, slow creature pop up. Would you really say, oh, it's a sea cow, the romance of mermaids beats the biology until you meet the manatee and decide the romance deserves better facts. When the Komodo dragon was first described by Western science in the early 20th century, many in Europe reached for mythic language, like a dragon or living dinosaur. To villagers on the Indonesian islands, the dragons were part of the landscape and story. Large monitor lizards, apex predators of their island. To Europeans, they felt prehistoric and monstrous. The Komodo dragon is not a fire-breathing dragon, but its size and presence explain how local tales and Western imaginations braided together. Dragons didn't disappear, they just got scalier and better at sunbathing. In the dense African rainforest, an animal once described only by rumor and hearsay finally stepped into the light, the okapi. Okapi? Okapi. I don't know if I said that right. For Europeans, its striped legs and giraffe-like head made it a kind of a forest unicorn. Local peoples of the Congo knew it well. To the outside world, it was nearly a myth. The okapi's story is a reminder that what seems mythical in one culture can be everyday life to another. Okapi are a story about perspective. Sometimes the myth is only an artifact of distance and ignorance. Legends don't only arise from living animals. Sometimes they grow out of bones. Some scholars have argued that fossil remains, like the beak skulls of Protoceratops, dug up on the steppes of Central Asia, inspired griffin legends. Among Eurasian herders and traders, a head that looks like a bird and a body of a mammal could easily be read as a single mythical creature by people who found it without modern taxonomy. This idea blurs the line. A creature can be myth-born from a fossil, and later that myth can feed art and coinage far from the place of discovery. There's something intimate in thinking myths might be how ancient people read the bones of a planet. We make monsters real for reasons beyond ignorance. Stories are tools to teach, to frighten, to sell, and to explain. A narwhal tusk becomes a unicorn's horn because the object wants meaning. A manatee becomes a siren because the lonely sailors need a story. Fossils become griffins because people are pattern makers, and the real animals are not lesser than their myths. They're often more fascinating. A colon cat's tail is more miraculous than the most fabrications of the imagination. Here's a useful phrase. Myths and animals are partners in a dance. Science gently takes the mask off. Folklore insists on the mask value. Both are human ways of dealing with the unknown. So what do we do with these stories now? Do we demystify everything until the world is antiseptic? Hardly. Instead, we let the facts open the door to deeper wonder. Knowing that a narwhal's tusk is a tooth does not make the unicorn myth boring. It makes it a human story about value, trade, and how meaning gets attached to things. Discovering the platypus didn't ruin magic, it remodeled our sense of what life could look like. If there's a takeaway, it's this. The boundary between myth and reality is porous. That's where the best stories live. And if you listen carefully to sailors' logs, to elders' tales, to the fossil beds under your feet, you'll find the world speaking in two voices at once. The voice of explanation and the voice of awe. If you loved wandering down these paths with me, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Tell me in the comments which creature you want me to chase next. The Loch Ness stories or the fossil-inspired monsters of the Gobi Desert. And if you have an odd local legend from your hometown that might hide a real animal, share it. I'll read the best ones on the next live. Some animals hide in our stories, and some stories hide in the animals. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Whew. Well, that was a little long, but I really appreciate you staying and watching till the end. Have a good night, guys. Bye.